It was a quiet evening in a small rural area in Ohio. The kind of place where nothing much happens. Neighbors know each other quite well, and life moves slowly. Crickets chirping, porch lights flickering, families settling in for the night. But on January 2nd, 2011, something happened that no one could have imagined. Sorry, this might be disturbing for some people, so take a deep breath. Now, a 10-year-old boy walked into a neighbor's house. He was not scared. He didn't look like he was confused. He simply said something that shocked people forever. "I just shot my mum." At first, people thought, he's just a kid. He's joking. I mean, to them, that's impossible. Maybe one of their neighbors even tried telling him, "Look, little man, you didn't shoot your mom. She's fine." Who knows? I'm just saying. But within minutes, police were called. When officers arrived at the Macvay home, the unthinkable shocked them. I mean, this is unlike what the world has ever seen. Inside the living room, 46-year-old Deborah Macvay was lying face down on the floor. She had been shot once in the head. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry, just silence and a single gunshot that ended everything. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and just like that, a normal day turned into a tragedy that would leave more questions than answers. Now here's exactly what people don't realize. This case didn't begin that evening. I mean, Macvay did not just shoot his mom out of the blue. This is something that started long before that, inside the home. I mean, inside the family. Joseph Macvay was only 10 years old. At that age, most children are thinking about school, games, and friends, not using a real gun, not death. But Joseph's life was not as simple as it looked. From the outside, the Macvay family seemed like any other: a mother, a father, children. But inside the home, things were different. There had been tension, arguments, and instability. Joseph's parents had separated just weeks before the incident. That kind of change can be confusing for a child. It can create anger, fear, and frustration that they don't know how to handle. According to reports, Joseph had already shown signs of struggling. At school, he was sometimes described as polite and quiet. But there were also moments when he became aggressive. He had incidents where he lashed out, moments where his anger came out suddenly. And this is where things begin to take a different turn. Because anger in a child is not always just anger. Sometimes, and it's something deeper, something building. Child psychologists point out that when children experience major family disruptions like separation or divorce, they often lack the emotional vocabulary to express what they're feeling. Frustration turns into outbursts. Sadness turns into withdrawal. And if no one intervenes, those feelings can fester. But here's what people don't realize. There is a powerful weapon in that house that's enough to kill any living thing. I'm sure you might know what it is. Guns, not one, not two, but several. At least 6 firearms were in the home, and even more shocking, they were accessible. These were not locked away safely. They were not out of reach. They were there, within access of a 10-year-old child. And this wasn't something new. In fact, just weeks before the incident, there had been an argument between Joseph's parents about those guns. His mother did not want them there. His father disagreed. That disagreement never got resolved. And now, looking back, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because this case shows a bigger pattern. When access meets emotion, things can escalate very quickly. According to the Giffords Law Center, in households where firearms are stored unsafely, the risk of unintentional shootings and child-involved incidents increases dramatically. More than 4.6 million American children live in homes with unlocked, loaded guns. And every year, hundreds of children gain access to firearms and pull the trigger, sometimes on themselves, sometimes on others. Joseph Macvay's case is a devastating example of that statistic becoming a reality. On that evening, everything seemed normal at first, and until it wasn't. Deborah asked her son to do something simple: bring in firewood, a normal request, something small, something that happens in homes every day. But for some reason, that moment turned into an argument. Voices were raised, tension grew, and according to Joseph's older sister, who was there at the time, it didn't stop there. The argument became more intense, more emotional. And then, something changed. Joseph reportedly said he was tired of the fighting, tired of everything. And then he walked away. Here's where things go wrong. At that moment, this could have ended differently. It could have stayed as just another argument. But it didn't, because Joseph didn't walk away to calm down. He walked into his room, and inside that room was a weapon, a .22 caliber rifle, one of the guns in the house, and one of the guns he had access to. And then, within moments, he came back. What happened next is something no family should ever experience, no child should ever do, and no parent should ever face. Joseph raised the gun. His sister saw it. She tried to stop him. She begged him. But it was too late. A single shot was fired. And just like that, everything changed forever. After it happened, Joseph didn't run away. He didn't hide. Instead, he walked to a neighbor's house and told them what he had done. He asked for help. He asked for an ambulance. He asked for the police. And in the background of the 911 call, his voice could be heard, repeating the same words: "I shot my mom." That 911 recording, though never publicly released in full, has been described by those who heard it as hauntingly calm. A child's voice, matter of fact, and as if he were reporting a broken window, not a life taken. When officers arrived at the Macvay home, they found Deborah's body. The .22 caliber rifle was recovered nearby. Joseph was taken into custody, and a small Ohio community was left in shock. When the case went to court, Joseph was charged as a juvenile, which means the law saw him not just as someone who committed a crime, but as a child who may not fully understand his actions. If convicted, he could remain in custody until he turned 21. But even that process became complicated, because when psychologists evaluated him, they came to a surprising conclusion. Joseph was not mentally fit to stand trial. He struggled with anxiety, depression, learning difficulties, and most importantly, he struggled to even talk about what happened. This is where things get even more complex, because now the question is no longer just, what did he do? But also, why did it happen? Was it anger? Was it confusion? Was it something deeper? Or was it a combination of everything? Court documents and news reports from the time indicate that Joseph's defense team argued that he did not understand the consequences of his actions. They pointed to his age, his emotional state, and the chaotic family environment. The prosecution, on the other hand, emphasized the deliberate nature of the act, the fact that he retrieved the gun after the argument and pulled the trigger. In the end, the judge agreed with the psychological evaluations. Joseph was deemed incompetent to stand trial. Instead of facing a traditional court proceeding, he was placed in a secure treatment facility, yes, where he would receive therapy and counseling aimed at helping him understand what he had done and addressing his underlying mental health issues. Here's what people don't realize. Moments like this don't come out of nowhere. They build, slowly, quietly, through emotions that are not understood, through environments that are unstable, through access to things that should never be in the hands of a child. In the months leading up to the shooting, there were multiple warning signs: the parents' separation, the escalating arguments, the presence of firearms without proper storage, Joseph's behavioral issues at school, outbursts of anger, difficulty regulating emotions, and yet no one intervened in a way that might have prevented the tragedy. This raises difficult questions. Could the school have done more? Could family members have pushed harder for counseling? Could the father have locked away the guns despite the disagreement with Deborah? We'll never know the full answer. But experts in child development and family safety point out that these moments, where multiple risk factors converge, are exactly when prevention efforts are most critical. And this is where this case shows a bigger pattern. It's not just about one moment. It's about many factors coming together. A child dealing with emotional stress, a home with conflict and instability, warning signs that were noticed but not fully addressed, and access to something dangerous. When all of these things exist in the same space, the outcome can be unpredictable and sometimes tragic. This case mirrors other child-involved shootings across the United States. In 2000, 6-year-old Kayla Rowland brought a gun to school and shot a classmate. In 2013, a 5-year-old in Kentucky accidentally shot his 2-year-old sister with a rifle he'd been given as a gift. Time and again, the common threads are the same: unsecured firearms, children in crisis, and adults who either didn't see the signs or didn't act in time. Organizations like Everytown for Gun Safety and the American Academy of Pediatrics advocate for safe storage laws, requiring guns to be locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition. Research shows that such laws reduce unintentional shootings by children. But at the time of this incident in Ohio, no such requirement existed on a federal level, and state laws were inconsistent. Even years later, there are still questions. Joseph was placed in a treatment facility. He received therapy, help, and support, but his current situation remains unclear. No clear public updates, no final answers. Because juvenile records are sealed, the public has no way of knowing whether Joseph is still in state custody, whether he was released after turning 21, or what his life looks like today. Some local reports from a few years after the incident suggested he was making progress in treatment, learning to cope with his emotions, participating in therapy. But beyond that, silence. And maybe that's the hardest part of this story. Not knowing, not fully understanding how something like this can happen, and not knowing whether a child who did something so devastating was ever able to heal. In the midst of all the analysis, it's important to pause and remember Deborah Macvay. She was 46 years old, a mother of 3. By all accounts, she was trying to hold her family together during a difficult separation. Her friends described her as someone who cared deeply about her children. The argument about guns, she was the one who didn't want them in the house. She saw the danger. But in the chaos of a separation, that concern was never fully acted upon. Her death is not just a legal case or a psychological study. It was a life cut short, a woman who never got to see her children grow up, a loss that ripples through her family to this day. People don't realize this. This isn't just a crime story. It's a warning, a reminder that some dangers don't look obvious. They don't always come from outside. Sometimes they are inside the home, hidden in everyday life. Because at the center of this story is not just a tragedy, it's a child, a mother, and in a moment that changed everything, forever. So the real question is not just what happened. The real question is, could this have been prevented? If the guns had been locked away, yes. If Joseph had been in counseling after the separation, possibly. If the argument that night had been de-escalated by an adult, maybe. But none of those things happened, and a 10-year-old ended up doing something that he likely didn't fully understand the consequences of. Something that would haunt him and everyone who knew the family for the rest of their lives. Only time may give some answers. But for now, this remains one of the most unsettling cases, not because of how it ended, but because of how it began. In a quiet house in rural Ohio, with a simple request to bring in firewood, and a child who had too much anger, too few coping skills, and too easy access to a loaded gun. If there's any takeaway from this story, it's that we owe it to children and to parents to do better, to recognize the warning signs, to secure firearms, to talk about mental health without shame, to intervene before a moment of anger becomes an irreversible tragedy, because some moments don't give us a second chance. Remember to subscribe to this channel for more future videos.